So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. I'm your host, Regen Ray, and I am so excited because today we're not just digging deep into soil, but we're going to dig deep into some data. Will Elrick, welcome to the Secrets of the Soil podcast.
Thank you for having me. Ray. I'm really excited and I'm happy to be here.
Me too. I'm really excited because I know that you have been crunching some numbers and working on a thesis, and it's all about certification and verification in this wonderful world of regen ag. And I know that this is a bit of a heated topic and discussion. So before we dig deep into that topic, maybe share with the soil lovers who are listening a little bit about you and your background.
Well, I did Agroecology and at Wagga Wagga, and I was working in Albury on a farm called Greengate Farm, and did a lot of my training and a lot of my lessons were done there. I actually learned so much at that farm, basically how agroecosystems can really succeed and how a functioning farm can really support biodiversity and threatened species as well. So I'm really, really passionate about agroecology, and again, the name's sort of progressing out into regen ag, and how regen ag can be really important for the future of agriculture, not only in Australia but around the world. And it's expanding. Like, it's in Europe they're talking regen ag, in the US, Canada they're talking regen ag. It's really starting to take over around the world, as organics did, in the 80s, especially. And so this conversation around certification has been, so I found it's quite heated and quite passionate responses in my research. It's been an interesting journey from there. But then I did my agroecology, and then I wanted to expand further, and I really wanted to study soil and soil biology. That was my thing. I wanted to get into the farm and get into the paddocks with a shovel and feel that soil, smell it, and understand the biology a lot more deeper. And I had some plans to do work on studying mycorrhizal fungi. However, COVID hit, and I started doing a science with honours in Southern Cross Uni, and COVID hit and the labs closed down, and all the uncertainty around COVID at that time happened. I wasn't allowed to go and speak to farmers or go on property with farmers and dig holes. And I had a timeline. I had to have an idea to do research. So I had to sort of make a decision. And I've been working with a couple of farmers in Western New South Wales about certification and how, what we could do with. I was just sort of working, just looking at things could happen in that world. And so I spoke to my supervisor and said, can I do research on certification, whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing? And they said, yeah, you can. And so I said, right, well, then I'll do that. So I did research on certification and whether it's going to be a good thing for regenerative agriculture or not. And it was certainly a real passionate and response from both sides. And I have to say, I will say it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It took so many hours in writing it up and doing the research, and it totally pushed me to beyond levels I never thought I'd be able to do.
Wow.
So, it's interesting.
Wow. And is that just because of the amount of moving parts that were involved, or like just the hours it took to kind of crunch the numbers and make meaningfulness out of it all?
Absolutely. So the hours it took, I was just constantly in front of that computer the whole time, doing the numbers and checking that and making sure that, what thing I had to do was have a balanced a balanced research. So I had to get, both sides' voices. I wanted to get the voices of everyone. I didn't want to just go, oh yeah, I agree with this one. Oh yeah, I agree with that one. No, it doesn't matter. You've got to get that balance and say, well, It doesn't matter. I've got to get the voices. I've got to be the narrator of what everybody is trying to say in this research. So to get that balance and to transcribing and then going through each transcription and each line and each thing and putting that into tables and stuff and trying to get everything down. But the writing up was the hardest because you had to, and again, trying to get that balance of everybody's voice. And that was the most difficult thing. And so, yeah. And
kudos to you.
I think, thank you. Yeah, thank you. It was definitely, but we come out with some really interesting things.
Excellent. Well, we're going to dig into that a little bit more soon, but I just want to, so where did this passion for the soil and agroecology come from? Did you grow up on the land or connected to the land, or you just got curious like I did?
That's a really good question. I've always loved nature, and I've always, when it was my escape when I was a kid, I'd go out into the bush. It was, but I was raised in the city. I wasn't raised in the bush. But my escape was to go into the bush, outside of Sydney or whatever, and just escape. And I've always had this affiliation. I've travelled and did all sorts of things, and just it came a time where it's like I want to immerse myself in this, and that's when I moved to Albury and started doing my training there. And it was life-changing for me, and now I just can't go back. It's and then I started seeing things. We start looking at the soil, and you start looking at the biodiversity, and you're looking at how things function, and you start, you're looking at water and how water works within the soil and within the landscape, and it just brings this whole world up to you. And I just love it. Now, I just want to work more and more and more to really not push, but allow communities to understand their impact. If you're in the city, you can still be part of the regen. We can do regen in the city, through types of methodologies. You've got all these different, like permaculture and biodynamics and all these different words. It doesn't really matter. It's all the same, but if we can bring it back to the soil, bring it back to water, bring it back to food, bring it back to our interaction with nature, then we'll be getting somewhere.
Absolutely.
Did that make sense?
Totally. I always say to people, it doesn't matter what you're doing above the soil. If you start nurturing below the soil, that's where it all makes sense. Whether it be syntropic or biodynamic or all the other labels you want to put on what you do on the top, that's just for us to label ourselves and maybe a little bit ego. But the soil doesn't really care. You're either nurturing or you're degrading.
Yes.
Being part of the problem. And so I think that the soil is really the true tail sign, because you could be doing biodynamics, but maybe there's one element that you're doing that is actually not really nurturing the soil. And that could be like a bit of a backward step. And so when we start looking at the soil and treating the soil as the foundation, which is the reason why we started this podcast and the reason why we, changed our avatar from our business point of view of saying we wake up every day to serve the soil. Is the soil today better than what it is yesterday? And are we planning for a better tomorrow than we are today? And then that's all good signals. Anything above the ground, that's just what we think, gives us meaning and vision and purpose. But so I totally get what you're saying there. And consumers that have the choice to buy products, to vote with their wallets, to understand what it is to be regenerative, be a regenerative human, practice regenerative spirit and soul. And even if it is on your balcony in an apartment, because it's a mindset, it's a paradigm shift.
Yeah. And it's just it's it's working with and interacting with it, and not saying I'm separate from, from nature or from the soil or from anything. It's actually, you are part of that, and we can embrace that. And that to me is really, really important, because I feel as as a community, as a society, whether you be any part of the society nowadays, it's so separate.
Yep.
And, until we can just really embrace that we're part of nature, we're not special, we are part of, we're part of the system,
Yep.
and the more we can interact with that, I think the better.
Oneness, absolutely. I agree. We've been throwing the word regenerative around a lot, and I really like to ask this with all the guests is, what does the word regenerative mean to you personally?
That's a really good question.
I know.
Well, regenerative means to me, it's working with succession and working that there is an improvement and it's getting better. So like with plant succession, you start off with a primary species and slowly it succeeds to a climax plant, a climax forest. Regenerative means to me becoming better than. So the soil is degraded. We regenerate the soil so the soil becomes chocolate, sweet and smelling, and lots of worms. You're seeing, you're seeing no diversity within the forest or in the farm, and then suddenly there's diversity. There's birds, there's frogs, there's animals interacting within that landscape. To me, that's regenerative.
Sounds magical. I love it. And I agree. You're probably one of the first people to shed some light on the whole succession side of things. Can you go a little bit deeper in that for our soil lovers who may not really understand what the word succession means from a plant and diversity point of view? I think a lot of people think of it as like passing your farm on to your kids and a succession like that.
A succession plan. Yeah, okay. Wow, that's actually for me is really, really an important step and an important thing to understand, because you can look at within it, you can look into a landscape, and whether that be anywhere in the world, and you can actually interpret, there's a story that landscape or that land is telling you and this is one of the key points of looking at plant succession, especially because like you'll have plants that will grow, and that will tell you the actual how bad the soil is, or not how bad the soil is, how degraded the soil is, or how healthy that soil is. Whether it's compacted, whether it's depleted of any of its nutrients, if it's got too many nutrients, if it's got these different aspects of where that soil is sitting at, and that plant will tell you a certain thing. And like, so if you've got a heavy amounts of weeds, of plants I'll call them plants.
I call them repair plants or signal plants.
They're telling me a story. They're telling me something here.
Yep.
And so with succession, what that plant is doing, it's actually creating an environment below that soil. It's creating an environment so your biology can actually start working within that soil. And then that plant will actually say, well, I've done my job. And it allows for another plant to come through. And then that grows, that starts increasing more. It actually breaks compaction. It actually allows water infiltration. So it doesn't have that concrete seal on the top of the soil or whatever the problem is, And then that plant will do its job, and then that will go, and then another plant will come in and start. Sorry, I talk with my hands a lot. Hopefully it's not too distracting. Sorry, it's my first podcast, so hopefully I'm not doing too much hand stuff. I'll keep my hands down, but then another plant will grow until we come to a climax, or to where the soil is really, really healthy. And I think that, and it's important to say that, because like you'll see a plant and you go, oh, that plant is bad because it's growing. It's like, well, not really. The plant's not evil. The plant's not bad. The plant's growing there because there's a reason why it's growing. And then we can understand that and not attack, and make war on a plant because it's a certain, and especially like in certain parts, there is such as, for example, blackberries. where they'll infiltrate a whole area, but you'll see where, think about where are they growing? Why are they growing so much there? How do we work with that? Well, obviously that it's an eroded gully or an eroded hillside that we need to actually start regenerating or start serving and steward and look after that. And then hopefully those blackberries will change. Going by the laws of nature, laws of plant, because it's a law of nature, it's a law of ecology, plant succession. You can look it up in any kind of textbook. And that's what will happen. Eventually come to a climax, and that's where you've got your rainforests and your yellow box forests and all your forests, which is your final climax. So that's where the forest is trying to get to. And I'm actually quite passionate about it because and the thing is, I remember I had no idea about this, and I was in a class and someone was telling it was Jeff Lawton who was talking about this, and I was like, wow, and I got really taken back because he was saying, this tree's okay, and I just got no, and and actually it was like, and then I started learning more, and speaking to and having my mentors, which guided me to understand, and then you start reading the story of what the landscape is saying to me, and it's like, right, there's the water, and then you can start seeing those things, and the more we sit back and just understand that, well, I know I'm probably repeating myself, understand the story of the land and what the story of the land is telling us, then that gives us a better capacity to work with the landscape and what is going to improve the land, what is going to help the landscape, rather than saying, well, I want to do this, and this. Well, that might not be the best thing.
I agree. Yep.
Does that make sense?
Totally. You've really painted that picture. I did a farm tour once, and they were talking about the literacy of the land, and I just thought that was a great way of articulating it, in a way of the same ways we learn how to read a book and we learn how to do math. We need to learn the art of literacy of the land, knowing what that 100-year-old tree is telling us, knowing what that noise. And I think our First Nation got this, and they intuitive to their spirit. We've just done a bad job of translating it over, or maybe because we created a divide. But anyway, and so that's the messaging I want, and what you did really well is say that what we do is a thistle pops up and we go, weed, kill it. And then it pops up again and we go, weed, kill it. And then it pops up again. And it's like, hang on.
Why is that coming up?
I know. No one's stopping. That's what's the definition of sanity? Doing the same thing and expecting a different result? Hello? Let that thistle do its job. And what you said is, once it's done its function, it will die and the next succession plan will present. And once that kind of gets to that area, goes through those cycles, then there is a nice symbiosis to all the different ecosystems and the water hydration. And it is a magical place to get to. But it's getting there, that's a challenge for a lot of people. Yeah,
it's interesting because I saw it with my own eyes like that. I was working with a farmer in southern New South Wales, absolute gentleman of a man, and he had a set stock farming system, and he wanted to change to a rotating system. And so we're working on and I was just still a student, so I was still learning all this. And his paddocks were full of thistles, crazy, full of thistles, right? But we did a system, and we're trying to manage just to bring the cattle down over along this slope, full of thistles. And then it was just such a wonderful learning for me, and actually seeing it with your own eyes, because it's when you actually experience it, when you hold it, or when you experience that thing, it's completely different just to reading in a book and going, well, such and such says this, and until you experience it, then you really see it. And anyway, this paddock was full of thistles, all trudged down, or the cattle, all trudged down. And then before you know it, these wild oats were growing. And you could actually see, you saw wild oats. And then it would come down, and you could actually see the difference. And it wasn't over months or years, or it was a straightaway change just by changing the management. It was just by changing the management. It was crazy. And seeing that change of succession, boom. And it was really, really, it was wonderful because you learn about these things, and then you're seeing it, as I said, seeing it through your eyes, it's like, wow.
And seeing is believing. It's always the tell sign, and that's one of the hardest thing being in the education space is you can put all the information in front of someone and they just don't get it. And they go on a farm tour, and that's why, in the Soil Learning Centre, we have a lot of virtual farm tours, is because maybe someone just watching that farm tour virtually, the penny drops. There's that It's like, oh, that makes so much sense now, And I remember going on this farm tour as well, where we were in the bus and we're talking, and, the lead would say, look at this paddock, look at all the trees. And everyone's like, yeah, amazing. He's like, no, it's not. They're all 100-plus-year-old trees. Where's the young trees? They're not going to be around in 50 more years. They're probably going to fall and die of old age. And then there's nothing. It's not just about seeing what's there today. It's having creativity to go, where's the younger plants? Where's the younger trees? Where's the older trees? It's the whole family line that needs to, and it's those aha moments that I got by being on a bus tour.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Wow, you've hit some really, really important points there, actually. Another one of my mentors is just a wonderful man. He would talk about trees die from a broken heart.
Wow.
And you'll see a tree in a paddock
alone, and
you'll see it dying or dead, and it's dying from a broken heart because it needs other trees. It needs to be, there's got to be a relationship. Absolutely. If it's not a relationship, parasites will come and then it will die, or will die from what a myriad of reasons. But basically, because it's on its own. And if we can allow that relationship of trees, or you can have a sterile, as you say, you've got all these 50-year-old, 100-year-old trees, but they're all one with nothing growing below it. And there's no succession. It's just a sterile environment. So there will be only, in an ecosystem perspective, there will be only one or two niches there. So there'll be one or two birds there, and they'll be on an edge. So that even cuts it even more. So, it's really, really important to understand that relationship, because plants have to have a relationship. There's got to be a relationship and interaction there. Otherwise, it becomes sterile. And it was funny, you just hit a really, really important point, because I remember doing some studies, and we did a soil profile, and we saw this massive soil profile, and there was this succession of trees growing. And there was, I can't remember the names of what trees they were, but what it was important is that they were stunted in growth. They were all stunted in growth, but down in the soil profile, all the trees were the same. The roots would come down and they'd stop, because there was this massive compacted layer, and the roots couldn't actually penetrate down, so they couldn't grow any further. Oh. Now, this used to be a sheep station. Now, the sheep station, there's nothing wrong with sheep. Sheep are good, it's the management, right? But it was a sheep station that was just to be clear on that, it's reject,
holistic, no pointing figures. Yeah, that's right.
It was an old degraded sheep station. It was a degraded sheep station where these trees were growing, but because of the compaction that happened with a constant boom, 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 and no rest or recovery for that land, it created this massive compact layer. And so you have these trees and actually stunted in growth because they couldn't penetrate through that compaction. And that just sort of goes to show, nature will tell you a story, and they're telling you, well, we've got to somehow get plants that will succeed here and let it rest and let it grow, but manage it properly, like our First Nations managed the landscape so well before the white fella came. and like I did some training with the fire sticks, and that was just incredible. Like seeing, like, there'd be no way I would want to do a cool burn. Like it takes years to learn to do a cool burn, and to be able to understand your story of your land. But it just showed me this interaction and this oneness or this relationship with the landscape, and how, their role or our role is to work within that system and understand. And if we stuff up, we stuffed up. And,
own it.
And you got to learn from it, and not, yep. I think that's really, really, really important. And that was again, another life bulb moment, as you said to me. It's like, wow, it just really learned so much from.
Absolutely. Well, soil lovers, I really want you to sit there and think about that. We've been talking a lot about, how we're all connected, and that the way that you look at the landscape is telling you a million stories if you just learn to read the literacy of the land. On that note, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to talk about all the data. It's to verify or to certify is the big question. Stick with us. Welcome back, soil lovers. We're hanging out with Will and Regen Ray. We're going to get our heads into the data. Will, you've put together a lot of data and maybe answered or made it a little bit clearer for us to answer this question, whether it's verification or certification, and do we follow what the organics models did and put stickers and labels on everything, or do we take a different approach? So share with the soil lovers, and even with myself, a little bit of your findings with this research that you undertook during COVID times.
Yeah, I can actually give you some really clear answers actually out of it, which is great. And the research, I interviewed a plethora of different people, and people that were involved in the industry, whether it be regen or organic. And I had to get a balance of organic and regen, and people that know that have been involved in the industry for a number of years, people that had a lot of experience, that actually were experts in their field, whether they be a CEO of a company, whether I had to get a whole database of people that would be able to give a good articulate answer to the questions.
Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's one of the values, I guess, of regen is biodiversity. So, have a biodiversity group of people, so it's not just skewed by, one time.
Yes.
Data collection.
Yes. It didn't want to be skewed. It had to be balanced. And I originally wanted to interview companies as well. And I actually had also another thing I was going to do within the data, and interview customers. But basically, because of the COVID, just changed the rules, and I just kept it to the experts. And okay, what do you know? What do you feel, and what do you feel is the best way forward for regenerative agriculture, and what can you say? What can we learn from the organic industry during its beginning, especially with certification, to where it is now. And so it was so we had some quite colourful interviews, to say the least. Not to me, like, not colourful as in the way like it was aggressive, or it was like they really wanted to push their thought process, or whatever they were feeling. They wanted me to know. So I have to know this, because otherwise, boom, 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 and if you don't, I want my voice to be heard. Yeah. So that was really important to actually put that in the data as well, because people had some really important points. Passionate. And very passionate. And so that had to be articulated into the thesis as well, into the data as well. Like someone saying, organics is this, and regen cannot do this. They have, and you've got this polar opposite of people saying we need to have certification, or people saying we cannot have certification, because if we have certification, it's going to ruin the industry. So you've got to have this balanced datum, to try and put it all together. It was quite intriguing. But I really, really appreciate, having interviewed these people, because I got to also see so many different views and different views and different stories, and people from all kinds of environments doing and involved with, whether it be organic agriculture or regenerative agriculture. As we're seeing this, it was amazing. And yeah, that was amazing in itself. So what came out? Well, what came out, which I didn't expect, was the journey certification took place in Australia. So we saw from the beginnings when it came, and it was articulated what happened, and not by one or two people, by a lot of people. They would articulate the journey that organics has been on in Australia from its inception to where it is now. One good thing was that everybody, well, most people talk, the majority, I should say, because a lot of people said organics was a good thing. It started off with good intentions, and it started, it started to create a conversation, and it started people, asking questions about where their food is coming from, and it started farmers going down a path. It started off with as a good thing. It started off as a good thing, and actually, when it came into Australia, the organic movement exploded, and it was, and going by the research, it was certification that allowed the growth of organic agriculture, but then what happened was there was lots of agendas and a lot of organic models. I won't mention any names, but organic models and certifications that came out that had their agenda, and then started this infighting.
Wow.
And they started growing, and then also farmers weren't allowed, because farmers used to do their audits and make sure that they were growing there appropriately, and that was stopped by the USDA because of exports. So then there was this conversation about organics becoming a model of farming that was monoculture anyway. It was industrial anyway, but it was just had a certification label on it. And so it all became about the label, and so then because of, there was a lot of things that actually came out, and then there was a part where, because government regulation didn't regulate organic or organics, farmers all over the place, if they were industrial, organic, or whatever, could use the term organic and get people to buy. And so there was no regulation, and it was all, and basically organics is a voluntary standard. You voluntarily say, I'm organic. There's no regulation basically on it, and which which became a scary thing, because you had farmers who were paying all this amount of money to get certified, and you got your bloke down the road, or your person down the road farming whatever, and they're selling a cheaper product, but they're saying I have organic, not organic certified, because if organic certified is regulated, but organic peanuts, but who the customer down the road, organic peanuts, $8 compared to $16. Right, I'll get the $8 one. It's still organic. Wow. But so you had this constant blurring of lines and no regulation that was happening, and everybody was. It became it just became a problem, for
Red
lack of a
tape,
better term.
complicated. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And then farmers were paying a lot of money to be certified. And so there was this disillusionment. And it's kind of sad because it really, really started off with good intentions. And it was a good thing when it began.
Yeah.
You know, in majority of the research.
Yeah, maybe even in my journey, I've kind of dismissed the importance of that. Like maybe consumers wouldn't be questioning where their food's coming from if that program never started. And I know that like what you're saying is it started off well and it ended maybe a bit messy, but without that starting, maybe we wouldn't have people even aware, you know, of organics or the fact that food could be grown differently and more natural. So if that's the outcome of that certification, then maybe that is it working. Because maybe I've dismissed that sometimes in my vocalness of my thoughts on it all. And I don't
absolutely
pay to play, but in hindsight, you know, maybe this did create the right curiosity in the aisles for people to ask better questions.
Absolutely. And that's, you know, going by the evidence and when I did the literature review, we're going through all the research. Literature review. The research is so much work. I had to research so much, you know, hours, you know, really different. But regardless of that, the and the research suggests that, so, you know, organics just exploded. Not exploded, that's the wrong term, but just really expanded due to the certification coming into Australia. So like it started off with a good thing. And if you look at the numbers are quite profound. How organic farmers grew due to the certification process. But then you had all this tricky stuff happening. And there was two major things that came out. And probably if someone's involved with organic certification and listening to this podcast, they'll probably go, yeah, well, we already know this. But at least we got it actually articulated, you know, was the expense of organics. And the focus of organics has been the inputs. This focus is on the inputs of what goes into the farm. So the chemicals and stuff. And so you can, you know, we can't have chemicals, but you can use this and you can use that, but you can't use this one, but you can use that one. And you've got this 3-year transition and this, and you've got all these rules and regulations that just in case nothing can go on, that's chemical. But then there's all these supplement things that you could use, and it's all monoculture anyway. So it's so you've got all these things. So you've got the cost where people are paying all this amount of money to be certified, and it's focusing on the input, and what came out of it. There needs to be a focus on the output.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. So there needs to be a focus on the output of. So what comes out, you know, so is this grain that you're growing, is this real good grain?
Quality.
Know? Is it quality grain? You know, or is it just fitting the bill that the industrial systems use, just checking the nitrogen, protein, blah? Is it quality grain? Is this mango the quality mango that you want, full of nutrient density and all those sorts of things? So that's what their focus was on. It's like, let's talk about the output of what's coming out of it, and looking at how the farm is running, you know, as opposed, because there was this focus on inputs and costs, you know, the costs to the farmer, rather than focusing on what's coming out the other side. And if we could focus what's coming out the other side, well then, you know, by default, that farmer should be doing the right thing on their landscape if we're focusing on that. So we can focus on both and look at it. And another thing was farmer support and collaboration, you know. That was a big thing as well, and making sure that farmers' communities are looked after, you know, and help with their transition forward, not, you know, not penalising. Yeah, not penalising the farmer. Okay, you've had a bad season, but you're still using this chemical or this product. You know, the farmers were constantly felt, well, the farmers that I interviewed and the experts that I interviewed, they were talking about that, how they felt penalised, and and then
like slapped on the wrist if you did something bad, but all you're trying to do is survive. Yeah,
and you could be decertified because of whatever reason, rather than supporting the farmer. Well, how can we move you through this? No, you're going to be decertified, and you're going to lose your certification, and so you're not going to get your premium cost for that thing.
And that just makes people sweep stuff under the rugs and hide it. There's no, the transparency of it, like to say, hey, and that's what I think I like with the word verification and some of the models I've seen around that is, are we moving in the right direction? And if not, like you said, what's that transition roadmap? Are we on track to get you more verified or more ticking? I don't want to use the word ticking a box because I think that's bad, but it's like, are your intentions to move this farm, this land, this ecological footprint into the right direction? Maybe this season you need to till. Maybe next season you need to do something. It might not be regen, but it's for the greater good of this parcel of land. And it's good stewardship.
Absolutely. And it's moving. You're on that journey and you're moving forward. And this is where your goals are.
Yeah.
But,
long-term thinking.
It's a long-term thinking. And, holding that farmer's hand, well, not holding the hand, you know what I mean? Like, holding the hand and just saying, righto, how do we manage this landscape? Because your land, your next door neighbour is going to have completely different landscape to what you do. So how are you going to manage that, and moving that forward? So basically one of the key points, was that if Regen decided to have a certification model, it cannot follow the organic model. And that's where it cannot. That basically was it. But there was a lot of people saying that we need to have a certification platform or some type of platform where people understand or customers understand that this farmer is on the journey to do the right thing as opposed to just doing a certain thing. And so that's where the terms verification and accreditation came up. And so they're the alternatives. So there are a number of people looking at doing a verification and accreditation model to help farmers go that way. But one thing that came out of this research is that if Regen decides to go down a certification model, which I think it will, just due to the complexity of how the industry, the agricultural industry is. If people want to know, okay, well, this person is doing the right thing, so I want to support them. So they've got to be a little label saying, yes, this person is right, this person's doing the right thing. But it cannot follow the organic model. It can't follow the same focus on inputs. It cannot follow, okay, you're doing the wrong, you're using the wrong chemical, or you're not using the right seed, or this, you're going to be punished for that. They cannot follow that model because it's going to create that separation, which is already happening. And we've got to be working with this together and work the best way forward, especially with Regen. It's really important. It's a really, really, really important industry, and it can be a game changer for the way the weather patterns are happening at the moment around the world. And it's a tangible, real way in which we can mitigate and navigate through these times at the moment.
Well, that is just really refreshing to hear. And I guess like even now hearing you explain that, I'll be honest, I don't like the idea of certification, but it gives me a lot more hope that if we do go down this model, we have some information with us now to say, let's not copy what we have done. Let's not copy what organic did, and let's not focus on input and what is in and what is out. Let's focus on output quality. And I think even more importantly, like mental health needs to be factored into this. So people on the farming with abundance, with a good mindset, with a healthy soul and a healthy spirit. And I know these are very hard to measure, but we really need to bring it back to more of that spiritual way of farming where we just go, oh, this feels right.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't tick the tick box. That's why I retracted what I said before, because coming from the tech startup world, it's all the 7 steps to magic morning routines, and you tick a box, and, you know, it's all these checklists to make sure people are doing their job properly. But it all creates just shortcuts, and people start lying about what they're doing. It's like, yeah, we checked all these. And then you go, no, you didn't. It says that, you know, it's like I come from the franchise model where there's a billion checklists for everything, and humans are always going to innovate and create smart cuts. You know, you know, we need to just focus on the output. You can't change that. And I can't wait for the day where, you know, maybe instead of having a star system, it's people's, you know, soil organic matter rating that's on the labels of the packaging, you know, and that's the badge of honor to say, I've gone from 1% to 6% organic matter. And, you know, we know that that's a positive sign to the organic verification.
And that's the measurements that I hope will be implemented. It's looking at those things and those tangible things. It's not, and you can't fake it.
Yep, that's right. That's right. And anyone can walk on there and verify.
Yes.
You know, or say, I want an independent soil test here. Hang on.
Yeah.
It's coming in at 3% and you're saying it's 6%.
6%.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
All the input stuff, you can't really track that sometimes after the fact, you know?
Yeah. And exactly, like it's hard to measure that, you know, because like that carbon is funny in its fluctuations within the soil. But if you can look at landscape health and come onto my farm.
Yes. Open door policy. Yep. Open farm. Yep.
You know, and not every Joe Blow can come in and look at your farm, obviously, but where people can come in and look and not come in with a judgment of, you know, assessing and, you know, what are you using and how are you transitioning? How are you and another big thing to that came out was the outputs. The collaboration where it needs for support, like you're saying, farmer mental health. The suicide rates that are going on in Australia, I don't even want to go there, but it'd be shocking to see. And farmer support, we need to work together. We're a human community. We're not, you know, we're not on our, you know, we need to support each other through this, and we need to support each other through the transition. You know, you have agro business that rules the roost at the moment, and we need to create a way in which, you know, people can income streams for regen ag, you know, specifically with rotations and all those sorts of things, which people are doing in WA, by the way. And there's a lot of movement coming in this way, which is great, but not becoming elitist. I'm organic, so I'm better than, you know, or this elitist model. That was another thing that came out about being elitist, and a lot of people felt that organics became elitist.
There's the ego again.
The ego, and that's become a big problem. And if we could just work together and not be elitist, but you see that in all sorts of things, you know, like because I do this, or I do it this way, I'm better than you because you're doing it that way, or I have the better system, or whatever. It doesn't matter. So long as your intentions are there and you're there to heal, and you're going to make mistakes. Like people make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have done it this way. Or maybe I should have listened in the first place or whatever, you know, it doesn't matter. So, and that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, although I heard a story from a First Nations elder saying, you know, this thing, we're allowed to make mistakes. When we did our training, we weren't allowed to make mistakes. We had to do it perfect the first time, but they were trained in a certain way that was already so deep. And I completely understand that mentality. And hopefully we can get there one, you know, eventually where we can say, no, we actually know we shouldn't be doing it this way. But at the moment, especially white fella, you know, we got to be humble and listen and just stop and listen.
Great advice. Yep.
Yeah.
You know, and it is very hard to put the ego aside and feel like the net worth is actually now in being still and listening rather than being on a tractor and tilling and doing stuff and ripping things apart. And, you know, that the whole, and, you know, I do feel that a lot of this stuff comes from our education system where we're graded, you're an A+, you're a C student, there's a ranking, who's the top of the class, who's in the 5%, who got the ducks. Like, it all comes from our education system that we have to beat and win. Even the fact that we do exams in silence and there's no collaboration, like, where in the world does that get simulated apart from an exam environment? In every workplace, you can turn around and say, hey, I don't know how to do this formula on Excel. I don't know how to bookmark something in this browser. You can always ask for help. Come to an exam, you're a cheater if you help each other, and that gets ingrained into us for 12 years.
Wow, yeah.
So no wonder why there is no collaboration. That's why we don't know how to help each other, So we can't see the bird helping the ecosystem. We can't see the worm adding value, because it's a competition of who's the elite. And so
I never thought about it that way. That is a really interesting...
Penny drop for everyone. Yeah, I feel like the education system really messed me over, and maybe I was just at a different wavelength. That I would be an A+ student through all my coursework. Come exam, I'd be a C, and so it would always drop my averages, and I look like a bad student on paper, but it's just because I don't do exam. I just don't get it. And being an early adopter to the internet and just knowing that there's this world that's all connected together and collaborating, and it just never really gelled with me, and I really struggled with that. And that's why I made it, part of my life work to educate. Whenever I can learn out loud and create content that helps people be a better version of themselves, I'm going to be there and do that, because I know that a lot of the other systems don't give us that empowerment to be better every day, and self-awareness and self-education. And you can use YouTube to educate, or you can use YouTube to waste time, and maybe sometimes you do a bit of both, learn and leisure. So yeah, I guess on that note, I want to ask you our signature question. And I really want to thank you for sharing your key findings. And I know that your research is going to get released soon, and we'll help share that around when it gets released. Do you have any timeframes of when it will be public domain or journaled?
Not sure yet. I'm sure I've actually submitted it, so I'm just waiting to see if it gets accepted at the moment. So I'm just in the waiting game at the moment.
And if not, we will still share a lot of the data. And I think this is just really important work, and I was so excited when I discovered that you were working on this and being in this space for many years. I always see it as a talking point and a sticking point, and a way where people just, like you said, let's not make the same mistakes we've made. But a penny moment for me during this conversation was maybe we wouldn't be asking these questions about where our food came from if we never introduced organic certification. So, if that's the one thing that it did, then I think it's moved the industry forward in leaps and bounds, and totally worth the pain that people may have gone through. So, maybe soil listeners are getting that aha moment as well. So are you ready to become the voice of our soil and answer our signature question?
Oh, what's your signature question?
Oh, yes, excellent. Well, so if you could embody the soil and become its voice, what would you tell us on Earth? So you are now the voice of the soil. Speak.
I'm living. I'm a living entity, just as much as a human is a living entity. So if you interact with me with respect, I will be able to give back to you with respect.
Beautiful. Love it. Living being, respect me and I'll respect you. Give and take. It's a two-way street. I love that.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, soil lovers, there you go. Another great episode. And this one, we're getting our hands dirty, but also getting into some facts and figures. Not often we get to hang out with people who have put all their, hours and hours and hours of work into the research to help us move this movement forward. So Will, I really appreciate the effort you've gone through and crunching all those numbers and staring at screens for weeks.
I checked your glasses because anyway, just like so many hours anyway. But awesome. It was all worth it. It was all worth it.
Totally. We wouldn't be here speaking and having a great time if it wasn't for that. And if you want to see Will's hand movements, and I'm Italian and I move my hands a lot too, then make sure you check out the video version of this podcast, which is hosted on the soillearningcenter.com, because we're quite animated and I loved it. Awesome. Thank you very much, Will. It's been a great chat and a great thing to do for me on a Friday afternoon. And you've joined us all the way from Spain. So thank you very much for the long distance Zoom call.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate being able to talk about this. It's such it's an important factor.
It is totally. Well, there you have it, soil lovers. Get outside, get your hands dirty, and next time you're in the shopping aisle, think about whether that food that you're picking up should be verified, certified, or are you making a good vote with your wallet? Until next time, I'm Regen Ray. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.